What's going on, YouTube fans? This is Far Fact and Fiction, and today in this video I'm going to talk about the real story of the Invisible Man. But before we continue, please like, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on all notifications. So let's begin. When the Invisible Man is brought up, the first thing people think of is the 2020 movie The Invisible Man, which is actually the remake of the 1933 film The Invisible Man. And I know what some of you are wondering. How about the movie Hollow Man that came out in the year 2000? Well, that was not a remake, but a spin-off. So why is that? Because in order for a movie to be a remake from a previous movie, it has to have the same exact title of that previous movie. For example, War of the Worlds 2005 starring Tom Cruise is a remake of the 1953 classic War of the Worlds, or The Clash of the Titans 2010 being a remake of the classic 1981 Clash of the Titans, and the list can go on. Also, there were several unsuccessful TV series of The Invisible Man, all of them with very bad ratings, and were panned by critics and viewers. There was a 1958 to 1960 TV series, a 1975 series, a 1984 series, a 2000 and 2002 series, and a 2005 series. Going back to the original 1933 movie, The Invisible Man had a sequel and other spin-offs that spawned from it. In this movie, Claude Rains, a very famous actor at the time, played the Invisible Man, or Dr. Griffin, and his close friend and the lady that he was in love with, Flora, was played by Gloria Stewart. And in case you didn't know, that Gloria Stewart appeared in the 1997 film Titanic as the old woman, or the old Rose Dawson. So let's talk about the book, The Invisible Man, written and published by H.G. Wells in the year 1897. From among the movies and TV series, the only film that comes close to the book is the 1933 film. So let us explore what the book is all about, or what the real story is all about. The 1897 book, The Invisible Man, is very intense, dark, full of action, and even in many parts of it is like reading a ghost story. Like I said before, the 1933 film, The Invisible Man, is the only movie that comes very close to the book, and there are similarities in both the book and the film. But even in the movie, they change things up throughout filming that totally differs from what happened in the book. The book starts out with a wandering stranger who is walking in the cold temperature on a snowy night. He walks into a hotel stay called the Coach and Horses. He is wrapped in bandages from head to foot, and he is wearing a hat, shaded spectacles or sunglasses, a trench coat, thick layers of clothes with boots, and is wearing a strange nose which looks fake. He carries a large black bag and demands a place to stay. The tenants of the hotel, including staff, are shocked with curiosity, some are disturbed, and others are wondering what's going on. The stranger, or the Invisible Man, gets a room and agrees to pay a portion of fee each night for a stay at the Coach and Horses. Despite everyone staring at him and the curiosity building up about him, the staff agrees to accept his terms for his stay. So they escort the stranger to his room, where he's going to stay for a good amount of time. Once he leaves out of everyone else's sight, everyone starts talking about him with so many crazy opinions and theories of who he is and what happened to him. Before we continue, the beginning of the book starts off very similar to the way the beginning of the 1933 movie starts out. But like I mentioned before, they did change a lot throughout the movie that deviated from the book. So let's continue. The stranger goes to his room, where the lady prepares to stay. He stands near the window and stares out, almost in a long daze. Once she is done preparing his room, she offers to take his coat, but he refuses, almost never looking at her, and she is puzzled. Before she leaves, he tells her he wants to be undisturbed and left alone, of course except during the times of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He also tells her he's expecting more of his luggage coming in soon. The Invisible Man stays in his room and awaits the rest of his belongings to arrive, which really is his lab equipment and his journals that contain important scientific formulas and theorems. One morning, a carriage arrives with the rest of his belongings. The stranger, or the Invisible Man, quickly comes out of the hotel all clothed to get his belongings from the carriage. When he gets closer, a dog that belonged to the horseman immediately starts viciously growling at him and then runs at him and attacks the Invisible Man. The dog gets a hold of his glove and rips it, then bites the base of his trouser leg and rips it as well. The horseman grabs his whip and unleashes it toward his dog, causing it to release the stranger, and then runs off. The stranger immediately conceals his ripped glove, turns, goes back in the hotel, up to his room to change his glove and ripped trousers. One of the staff of the hotel decides to check on the stranger to see if everything's alright. So he heads upstairs and notices the door to the stranger's room is slightly open, so without letting himself be known, he enters. When he does, he saw that the stranger has changed out his trousers, but was in the process of changing out his glove, and what he saw scared him. The stranger had no hand. It was like before he had a hand, but now he didn't. The stranger notices a man at the door, turns and slams the door in his face. The man is shocked, leaves, but keeps what he saw to himself, for the time being. The stranger, or the invisible man, after changing out his glove and his trousers, goes outside with haste, brings in the rest of his belongings, the lab equipment, and puts it all in his room. Once the stranger is settled and unpacks all his lab equipment, which mostly are bottles, flukes, and chemicals, he goes to work. When the invisible man is at work with his lab, he almost forgets to eat, even forgets to pay attention to who he's watching. One of the staff of the hotel goes to serve him food and walks in on him while he's working and notices that his shaded spectacles are not on his face, but laying on the table. She gets a good look at his face, and to her horror, she notices he has no eyes in his sockets. They are completely empty and dark. The invisible man notices, turns away, grabbing his shaded spectacles, and puts them back on his face. Then he severely demands her to leave immediately. She leaves stunned, shocked, and disturbed. The invisible man knows that parts of his visibility is being noticed slowly but surely, and it will be soon that his secret will be completely revealed if he doesn't find a way to change himself back to normal state. And that is what he's trying to do in his lab. He also knows he does not have a lot of money and soon will run out, so he decides to do one thing, and that is he decides to leave the hotel while everyone's asleep in his invisible state and find money in other people's houses. The invisible man removes his clothes so he can become invisible and sneaks out at night. The town is not a wealthy place and the people there are not rich, so he's limited to what he can steal. So he enters each house to find whatever he can. Even though he's invisible, his presence does wake up some of the homeowners. For example, with the sounds of his footprints on creaky floors, doors opening on their own, drawers opening and shutting, and when they wake up and investigate, they see nothing. Absolutely nothing. The homeowners knows their belongings are out of place, with some of it missing, including their money and other valuable things. Other homeowners in other houses who had their homes broken into by the invisible man heard all the noise, came in, and caught him in the act, yet only to see the furniture move on its own, and then even being attacked by their own furniture. Fear and confusion came on the townspeople. Many believed they were haunted by an evil spirit, but how can that be? Because their personal belongings were missing, and ghosts do not steal money. The invisible man managed to steal and collect enough funds to keep his room for a good amount of time to continue his experiment. It wasn't a lot of money that he stolen and collected, so eventually he completely runs out of funds. And when that happens, there's a hostile confrontation between the stranger and the innkeeper. The invisible man is evicted from his room and is forced to leave, and this totally infuriates him. He refuses to leave, but again the innkeeper, along with the staff, demands that he goes. Finally, the invisible man hits his boiling point, then responds with something to this effect. "You really want to see who I really am? I'll show you." And saying that, he removes his shaded spectacles and throws them down. Then removes his fake nose, followed by his gloves, and unwraps his bandages. Everyone is totally frightened and scared. This stranger really is invisible, and there is nothing underneath his clothing, yet he is there. Before the invisible man removes the rest of his clothes, the staff and even the bystanders who are watching attacks him in hopes to tackle him and restrain him. When they do, it fails. The invisible man is too strong, and he totally throws the people off. After he thrashes the crowd, he starts throwing furniture at the people, and there was chaos at the Coach and Horses Hotel. The invisible man removes all his clothes and runs out of the hotel, causing chaos inside the hotel as well as outside the hotel. Then he gets lost, leaving his books and his lab equipment behind. The stranger, or the Invisible Man, is stranded outside and the snow is melting and the weather is a lot warmer. He wants to go back to the hotel and retrieve his books that contain important formulas and theorems. He also finds out that the whole town has been warned and notified of who he is and what he has done, and the town has accepted the fact that there is an invisible man and he is dangerous. So while he's outside, stranded, he comes across this homeless man named Thomas Marvel. The Invisible Man introduces himself to Thomas Marvel and eventually makes a deal with him, telling him he wants to go back to the hotel and get his scientific books with his help. In return, since he's invisible, he can help Thomas Marvel get anything he desires, such as clothing, money, and many other things. He also threatens Mr. Thomas Marvel that if he betrays and double-crosses him in any way, he will kill him. Being hesitant and not entirely sure he wanted to go along with what the Invisible Man wanted, he went along with the deal anyhow. So both made their way back to the Coach and Horses Hotel to retrieve the scientific journals. The Invisible Man showed Thomas Marvel the window to his old room and told him to stay outside near the window, which was on the second floor. He also told Thomas Marvel that he will be going inside the hotel and up to his old room, and when he does, he will open up the window and toss him the scientific books, and both will leave once it has been accomplished. So the Invisible Man goes inside the hotel, unseen by the people, and goes up to his old room, and there he saw the police and the staff going through his stuff and his scientific journals, and this again infuriates him. And all of a sudden, the Invisible Man goes mad and goes wild and starts throwing things and furniture at the police and the staff in the room. The staff and the police team up to try to restrain and pin down the Invisible Man, but again, he's abnormally strong and throws off the men. Some are shaken up as they lay on the floor, others are knocked out, and the other portion of the men who tried to challenge the Invisible Man simply run out. Then the Invisible Man grabs the scientific books, ties them together by a rope, opens the window, and drops them next to Thomas Marvel, and tells him to grab them up and wait for him to come outside again. Thomas Marvel just stared up to the window where the books were dropped from with fear and with a disturbed look, because he heard the violent fight and the shouts that happened inside, and even saw the people running out of the hotel with a sense of fear and urgency. He slowly picks up the scientific books from the ground and looks up to the window where he believed the Invisible Man was standing at, and then he runs off. This totally enrages the Invisible Man again, and he runs out of the hotel in pursuit of Thomas Marvel, shouting at him and telling him that he's a coward, he's a traitor, and I'm going to kill you. Thomas Marvel continues to run from the Invisible Man, still holding on to his scientific journals. He runs long and as fast as he can, and eventually makes his way to the police station downtown. When he gets to the police station, he throws the doors open wide and yells for help and begs to be protected, and tells everyone the Invisible Man is coming and he's going to kill him. Of course, by this time, the town, including police, has been on lookout for this visible perpetrator. Again, Thomas Marvel screams for someone to protect him, and even demands to be locked up so the Invisible Man won't get to him. Several officers take Thomas Marvel, who is still holding on to the books, into another room to question him. And no sooner after they take him to another room, the Invisible Man arrives and all chaos breaks loose. When the Invisible Man came, he violently forces the main door to the police station open, which is filled with police officers and customers, shouting threats to Thomas Marvel and demanding that his books be returned back to him. As he runs and forces his way through the crowd, trying to get to Thomas Marvel, some of the people reach out and manage to grab onto him, and then the rest jump in to attempt to restrain the Invisible Man. And all of a sudden, the Invisible Man fights back, and there's a great brawl in the police station. This fight was a lot more challenging for the Invisible Man, because there was a lot more people this time. But he throws many off and even starts punching anyone he can get a chance on. As people are being thrown on the floor, against a wall, and getting punched, a bystander pulls out a pistol. This bystander, who pulls out his pistol, aims in the general area where he believed the Invisible Man was, and making very sure that he does not shoot anywhere else, he waits for a slight chance or a slight gap. Then he takes an educated guess and shoots. All of a sudden, there was a sound of staggering feet. Then there was another sound of pattering of feet, as it quickly turned and went out the front door of the police station. The Invisible Man has been shot in the arm. And again, he's stranded outside with the temperature dropping. He knows he gotta take shelter and also has to find a way to get aid to his wounded arm. So he finds a particular house that he's familiar with, and this particular house is home to an old friend he knew from his college days. This old friend was Dr. Kemp, who is a medical doctor. He breaks into Dr. Kemp's house, and upon hearing a window break downstairs, Dr. Kemp leaves his office and goes down to investigate. And there, he encounters and starts a conversation with his old college friend, the Invisible Man. At first, Dr. Kemp heard rumors of an Invisible Man and did not believe it until he encountered the Invisible Man, who really is Dr. Griffin. Dr. Griffin tells Kemp that he's been shot and that he's tired and he's hungry. Dr. Kemp realizes Dr. Griffin, his old friend, then asks him who shot him. But Dr. Griffin, the Invisible Man, simply says, "I'll tell you later, I just need aid and shelter for now." Dr. Kemp escorts the Invisible Man upstairs into his office and sets him down on the lounge chair, then goes back down and grabs some food and even some bandages, then heads back up to his office. He gives the Invisible Man, Dr. Griffin, some food and hands him the bandages for his arm. Dr. Kemp watches as the Invisible Man unwraps the bandages and wraps it around his wounded arm. It was like the bandages moved on its own and wrapped itself around an invisible object. And of course, this invisible object would be the invisible arm of Dr. Griffin. Dr. Griffin wraps his wounded arm, with the bullet of the pistol enter his upper arm that passed right through, barely missing his humerus. The blood that came off his wound really started to faintly show its color. Then Dr. Griffin, the Invisible Man, tells Dr. Kemp everything that has happened. Dr. Kemp sits down and listens. Dr. Griffin, or the Invisible Man, explains how a few months ago he conducted an experiment in his apartment starting with animals of how to make living things transparent from inside and out, or invisible. He had this experiment in mind since the university days, and over the later years he came up with formulas and theorems to his experiment of how to make living things invisible. Then he recorded these formulas and theorems in his journals, in which Thomas Marvel ran off with earlier. Dr. Griffin explains how his experiment with animals failed, and because of that, he changed his formulas and theorems a slight bit, and was determined it would work this time, but instead, he decided to test the experiment on himself. He then ingested a liquid serum. It worked, and over a period of 3 hours, his body slowly became transparent, or invisible. And while this transformation happened, it was a very painful experience. After he was fully transparent, or invisible, he wanted to immediately reverse the process and become visible. So he went back to work in his lab. After a while, his experiment in his apartment, the loud sounds and smells of chemicals drew attention to the annoyed neighbors and eventually the landlord. He would get knocks on the door by neighbors, questioning his activities in his apartment. And then he got a visit from his landlord. Since by now he's invisible and totally transparent, he does not want to be seen as just a walking clothes. So he finds bandages, wraps his whole head and neck, then puts on shaded spectacles he had used outside during sunny days to hide his empty eye sockets. Then lastly, he wears gloves. As he opens the door to his landlord, his new appearance being all wrapped up creeps the landlord out and even the bystanders who are watching. Despite being all creeped out by Dr. Griffin's appearance, upon observing of what he was doing in his room and disapproving of it, the landlord gave Dr. Griffin many warnings and told him to get all his lab equipment out. Then Dr. Griffin explained that he totally ignored all the warnings and eventually was evicted from his place. He was furious, so he gathered all his personal belongings, packed all his lab equipment, and had them shipped to the Coach and Horses Hotel where he stayed at from the very beginning. Then he admitted that he set fire to the place and burned it down. He finally explained of what happened at the hotel. He bragged about the time he went to people's houses stealing money, and then he said he would do it again. Then he talked about how he was evicted from the hotel after running out of funds and getting into a fight there. Then he talked about Thomas Marvel and how he stole the books from him and getting in a fight at the police station. Then he mentions that he still wants his books back from Thomas Marvel, that he hates Thomas Marvel, that he still wants vengeance against him. Then Dr. Griffin went into detail about his invisible state. One of these details was, because he's invisible, his physical strength is way above normal, which explains how he's able to take on crowds of people and even just thrash people around. The other detail of his invisible state that Dr. Griffin mentioned was that even though he's invisible, he can be easily detected by dogs. He mentioned about the situation at the Coach and Horses Hotel when he was attacked by the horseman's dog. He mentioned that dogs simply do not feel right around him and tend to be aggressive towards him. He even got chased out by some of the homeowners' dogs the time he was breaking into people's houses looking for money while staying at the hotel. He was invisible, but they knew he was there. Lastly, Dr. Griffin, the Invisible Man, mentioned of how he wanted Dr. Kemp to help him get his journals back from Thomas Marvel, and also with his help have Dr. Kemp as an accomplice, since by now he was obsessed of being invisible than he was ever before. After hearing these crazy and horrible things that Dr. Griffin or the Invisible Man told him, Dr. Kemp hands Griffin his robe to slip on and told him to get some sleep. Then Dr. Kemp told Dr. Griffin he could sleep in his office, and then he was going to head to his bedroom to sleep himself, and both could talk tomorrow. So Dr. Kemp leaves Dr. Griffin in his office and heads to his bedroom. Dr. Kemp paced back and forth in his bedroom for a very long time, thinking of what to do next. As he did, he heard loud snores in his office and realized the Invisible Man was deep asleep. So he immediately left his bedroom and quietly went downstairs. When he was downstairs, he slipped on his shoes, put on his coat, a scarf, and his top hat, and went out to head down to the police station. When he arrived at the police station, Dr. Kemp saw there was a big mob of people clamoring outside. So he pushed through the crowd and saw 2 armed police officers at the entrance, and he told them he knew where the Invisible Man was. So the 2 police officers let him in and totally ignoring the demands of the mob towards him of where the Invisible Man was. Dr. Kemp goes in and meets up with the police chief. Dr. Kemp then has a long talk with the police chief and his officers who are currently planning on how to capture the Invisible Man. Dr. Kemp tells the identity of the Invisible Man, his name, and also how both knew each other since the university days. He tells the police of Dr. Griffin's scientific experiment and tells them because now he's invisible, it has affected him physically and even mentally. He tells them that Dr. Griffin is not the same and it is like he's becoming less human as time passes, and he's becoming a lot more dangerous than ever before. Then he told police that Dr. Griffin is in his house, asleep and injured from a gunshot wound, and how he wants Dr. Griffin unharmed but in custody. Finally, he told police to bring dogs because dogs somehow can spot Griffin when he's invisible, and they are his weakness. Dr. Kemp enters the front door of his house along with 5 police officers. They shut the door behind them. They all went upstairs to his office, and Dr. Kemp noticed that his office door was closed because before he left, it was open. He then called out to Dr. Griffin. Then he heard Dr. Griffin reply with an angry voice, "Kemp, you're a traitor. I will kill you soon." All of a sudden, the door to the office opened inward, and the robe that Dr. Griffin wore was lying on the floor. Then the Invisible Man rushed out with intense urgency, throwing Dr. Kemp against the wall in the hallway and throwing the police downstairs who were preparing to use their clubs. The Invisible Man or Dr. Griffin scrambled downstairs and headed to the front door. He knew that the police and the mob of the townspeople had the house surrounded, so he very quickly opened the front door and rushed outside and clashed against the formation of the police. Despite of him being injured and tired, he managed to break through the police that tried to barricade his exit. He then clashed with the crowd of the mob, managed to break through, and escapes. Dr. Griffin escapes, but the next day he leaves a note saying that Dr. Kemp will be the first one to die. Then he gets a hold of a pistol and finds a police chief and shoots him dead. Still determined to kill Dr. Kemp, the Invisible Man follows Kemp to town, realizing that Kemp was secretly staying somewhere else. Dr. Kemp came to the quick realization he was being stalked and pursued by the Invisible Man, so he makes a run for it. He barely makes it to town till Dr. Griffin catches up and attacks Dr. Kemp. Dr. Kemp screams out for help, and Dr. Griffin starts to choke out Dr. Kemp. And no sooner this happens, a good number of bystanders, such as farmers, blacksmiths, and many more, saw from a good distance of what was going on. These bystanders realize it's the Invisible Man, so they stop what they're doing, grab any object they can use for weapons, unite to attack Dr. Griffin. When the angry mob reached Dr. Griffin Dr. Griffin then releases Dr. Kemp, who is still alive, and fights back. Dr. Griffin is still weak from his gunshot wound, but still puts up a good fight. The mob is stronger, and eventually they overcome Dr. Griffin, and then he is beaten severely. They continue to beat down the Invisible Man until Dr. Kemp stops him. Dr. Kemp then tries to save Dr. Griffin, who he feels is lying on the ground, motionless, but he's unable to see his wounds and broken body because he's invisible. Then Dr. Griffin, the Invisible Man, started to become visible till he was fully seen, and Dr. Kemp realized that Dr. Griffin has died. Alright, that wraps the story up, and also in other book versions, it says that Thomas Marvel, the homeless man that ran off with Dr. Griffin's books, was said to have secretly kept it, and since he could never figure out the formulas himself, and didn't want anyone else to know about it, the secret was forever lost. If you're a fan of storytelling, podcasts, or just fact and fiction, then please subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on all notifications. See you in another video, and thank you for watching.